All right, my English teacher friends, I'm so excited to present this video to all of you. So sometimes folks call me an edutainer or a gamifier, and I'm always trying to engage my students with little hooks and tricks and gimmicks and stuff up my sleeve. And I do gamify instruction a lot. I very much value the factor of edutainment in education. I think that now more than ever, especially in a post-COVID era, secondary students in particular are just challenging us to engage them. They're demanding that we engage them. So I'm always thinking out of the box in terms of how can I make instruction more meaningful and engaging and impactful. And I stumbled upon this game called Smartass that you're seeing right here, and it's a trivia game. And it occurred to me, oh my God, I can make a Smartass game myself with focusing on poetry and rhetorical analysis, because I teach lit, lang, and then I do on level 9, 10, 11, 12, and do college as well. So for this particular video, I'm going to highlight the poetry analysis edition of Smartass, and I'll follow it up with a video that highlights rhetorical analysis in the coming days. So my subtitle is Gamifying Multiple Choice Mastery, and I'll explain why in my next slide. Here's what I have found. All right, I keep really careful statistics and chart a lot of data with my students. We have to in my district for progress monitoring purposes. And I was just curious with regards to my AP Lang and AP Literature students from last year. I gave a multiple choice test in early October, a full-length multiple choice test in early October to both my Lang and my Lit students. And I looked at their multiple choice scores on similar full-length multiple choice tests in May, the end of April, the beginning of May, right before the exam. And I asked myself, how much growth and maturation has happened over the course of those months just by skilling and drilling? And here's what I found. The kids that in October were scoring about, 28, 29 correct, come May, they were still scoring around 28, 29 correct. And the kids that were crushing it were still crushing it. The kids that were really struggling were still struggling. There was not much growth or maturation in skilling and drilling the multiple choice. And I'm like, why are we doing it then? It seems kind of futile. So here's what I've come up with. I got to teach kids how to question a text, because ultimately you got to ask a question of a question. That's what good multiple choice test takers do. They ask questions of the questions, and it goes above and beyond seeing the patterns in particular question constructs. You have to go above and beyond knowing all the terms, the devices, the techniques. I think students really need to become good at questioning a text. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this Smartass gamification piece that I have here. So what I do is this. I have the actual Smartass board in the center of my classroom, and I have an Elmo projector in my room. And so we project this onto my overhead screen. And even if you don't, it's no big deal. Kids can come up and take a look at it. And we follow the original rules. So I just split the class into teams. Usually it's a team of about 3, 4, 5 students per team. And we follow the original rules that are delineated in the Smartass board game. So what I've done for this particular video is this. I'm presenting 3 poems to you. One is Sentimental Moment, or Why Did the Baguette Cross the Road by Robert Hershon. The second poem is Jorge, the Church Janitor Finally Quits by Martina Espada, and then Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. So instead of going through 3 passages in a multiple choice exam, we're going to do 3 poems with this questioning strategy. And what I have done is I've created all the questions based around the board game. So you have all sorts of various questions, like hard-ass questions. Who am I? Where am I? What am I? And those really governed my questioning with regards to the poems. So I'll show you how I would do this if you were students in my class, first focusing on sentimental moment or why did the baguette cross the road. So here's the poem. I'm assuming this is not a well-known poem, but it's one of my favorites. As my kids get older, this one resonates with me. So I'll read it to you. Don't fill up on bread, I say absent-mindedly. The servings here are huge. My son, whose hair may be receding a bit, says, "Did you really just say that to me?" What he doesn't know is that when we're walking together, when we get to the curb, I sometimes start to reach for his hand. So it seems like a really simple poem. Kids read that and they're like, what am I supposed to do with that? This is very obvious. What am I supposed to say about the obvious? And I know for some of us that teach AP literature, sometimes in years past, the poems I have felt are very obvious, and the kids just don't know what to say. They come back from the exam center saying, I had no clue what to say, above and beyond stating the obvious. But there's a lot of trickeration going on in here, and upon first read, students miss it. So ultimately, with gamification methods like this, I'm training students how to read. So let me go through my series of questions, for example, just for this poem. So I have two questions for where am I, what am I, who am I, and then two hard-ass questions. So here are my where am I questions. It says, a policing grammarian would reprimand Hershon for not properly concluding his sentences with a period. Where are the periods? And why is this syntactically significant? Go back to the poem. There's no periods. Most kids don't make that observation, right? You have to train kids to see and how to read for syntactical maneuvers like that. And then we'd have a discussion about that, and I would teach them everything they need to know about syntax if they were, incapable as a collective class to come up with an answer for that. But what a great way to teach syntax instead of skilling and drilling through multiple choice. Yet again, a policing grammarian would note that the parenthetical statement in the third stanza is missing a comma after curb. Where's the comma? And how does this absent comma create meaning in the work as a whole? So clearly, Hershon's professional writer, professional poet, knows how to make a parenthetical statement, but that comma is missing, right? It's done deliberately. What's the authorial intent? So again, students need to make these observations when they read. And this is the kind of stuff that the College Board, they kind of sort of throw at us, but it's teaching kids how to read with just nitty-gritty acuity, right? Really getting their nose into the text and making the big observations, asking the good questions. So those are my where am I questions. And I color-coded this too, so as you can see, these were my green questions. They correspond with the green portion of the board. And then I have blue questions, which are what am I? And it says, the title is bridged by the word or. What part of speech is this? How does this part of speech create meaning in the work as a whole, right? So most students don't pay attention to conjunctions. My students, especially at the AP level, know all their parts of speech. At least I skill and drill it enough so that they should know. So, the idea that or creates this juxtaposition in the piece or a dichotomy or a binary, it's really, really key to the overall, universal truth of the poem. So it gets their nose in that aspect of it. What am I? What is a conjunction? What's the purpose of a conjunction? So here's another one. Oops, I screwed that up there. So here's another one. I spy with my little eye two question marks signifying that a question has been posed. What do we call these question marks? In terms of constructing meaning, why does Hershon take this approach? And I think, again, that's a really good question. It's pretty cool that students can get to that. The purpose of a rhetorical question. It's obvious to me. I've been reading poetry for years, but to young 16, 17-year-old students in an AP literature class or an on-level junior class, they don't see those things. Hershon asked two very loaded rhetorical questions. Analyze it, get to it, get to the gist of it. So who am I questions are covered by orange. Describe who the father is. How does Hershon characterize him? Use the text to support your answer. So if there were, if we were going to draw up multiple choice questions for this, there's going to be a lot of characterization questions of the father and the son. So the who am I's get to those multiple choice questions. Describe the son. How does Hershon characterize him? Use the text to support your answer. So again, this is a really cool way to do multiple choice training minus the multiple choice. And then when you put multiple choice in front of kids after you do this enough, you're going to see their scores augment a little bit. It's just a matter of reading. Kids really need to read a lot and have a lot of practice with small text. Lots of poems, prose passages, short passages, and skill and drill it that way instead of just doing straight up multiple choice. So here are my hard ass questions. Analyze and interpret the title of the poem. Use the text to help support your position. What a strange title for a poem, right? And most people are like, I don't know. Why is it a sentimental moment, or why did the baguette cross the road? What's the baguette have to do with it? They're out to dinner. The father's being overprotective. He's kind of stuck in time a little bit, and eventually the epiphany is going to illuminate the light bulb above a student's head, and they'll figure it out. And then my last hard ass question. As we know, tone is not monolithic. What are some fantastic words to describe the tone of the poem? And now here's the kicker with this. So in asking all these questions, students will have come to a total read of the poem, right? So we've asked everything that the College Board's going to ask in a gamified way. And then if you were to present them with multiple choice questions in the vein of the College Board, they're going to do a lot better taking this approach. So I did it for Jorge, the Church Janitor Finally Quits by Martina Espada, and Still I Rise for Maya Angelou. So typically we work through a couple of poems at a time. And, a lot of teachers think that gamification strategies slow down their instruction. It actually doesn't. This is just another way to have a Socratic seminar, a fishbowl, or Harkness discussion, but it's gamified. And I find that element of collaboration and competition is really a nice element to have in the classroom, especially in my AP Lang classes and AP Literature classes. So I'll just show you a couple of my questions for Jorge. Where am I? The narrator asserts that he must be from the country of janitors. If we were to pull out a map, where is this place located? Hard-ass bonus question. What's the name of this literary rhetorical term? So ultimately, I want them to get to the fact that it's a euphemistic expression. It's this understated way of saying, hey, man, the church parishioners are being really racist towards Jorge, and he's kind of being flip about it. He's being a little sarcastic about it in his response. So in asking this question, they're getting to the tone. They're getting to a new term, euphemism. That's the one that doesn't come up all that often. But it also gets them into tight diction analysis, which is all skills that they're going to need to be, killer multiple choice test takers. So here's another where am I? Literally, where is the setting of the action? And how does this setting create situational and dramatic irony within this poem? So if the College Board were to ever present this poem on a multiple choice test, I think they're going to get to the situational and dramatic irony, which is hard for students to get. I think teaching irony and paradox and sarcasm is really difficult for students to develop their ear. So this is just one way to develop those reads. So other questions, what am I? The mop becomes Jorge and Jorge becomes the mop. Identify in the text where this occurs. What is the literary term for when Jorge becomes the mop? What is the literary term for when the mop becomes Jorge? So we're getting that personification and objectification in this one. So again, great way to teach terms, devices, techniques, theory, and just go through the whole kit and caboodle with them for this. My who am I gets into the characterization questions again, and then my hard ass questions, asking questions about tone, and then conflict. The conflict is easy to identify in this poem, the obvious racial divide between Jorge and the church attendees. Does the conflict get resolved? Support your answer with the text. And I often put that with my questions. Support your answers with the text. Again, always keep your nose in the text. So Still I Rise is a poem that I think probably many of you have taught or you're familiar with. How do you analyze it? Apart from doing a Socratic seminar, a fishbowl, lecturing it, Harkness discussion, check out the questions I asked for this. So where am I? The author gives several contextual clues to provide a relative setting for the poem. Based on these clues, anchor the poem in a general setting. Use the text to help support your answer. I think kids often have a hard time situating this poem and don't ascribe the values where they need to go, and they misinterpret it. So here's another one. The author repeats I rise several times. What is this called from a literary standpoint? And literally and figuratively, what is the narrator rising from? And that question like blows their mind. What is she rising from? I don't know. She keeps saying, I rise, I rise, I rise. What is she rising from? And they really have to think carefully about this. I think the racial component of this poem often eludes kids, and then when you bring it forward to them and kind of put their face right in it, they're like, oh, I get it, I get it. So what am I? I spy with my little eye that Angelou asks a lot of questions. What is this called? What is the author's intent, and how do these questions create meaning in the work as a whole? So the other cool thing about asking questions like this is that students begin to multitask. And what I mean by that is, if you're familiar with my template, the first premise, I have my students multitasking in ways where they can begin to see how like syntactical moves create tone shifts, and how the literary terms, devices, techniques all interlock with each other to get them away from writing one paragraph tone, one paragraph syntax, one paragraph diction. Don't want them doing that. We want them to be able to interlock them and interchange them together, and so that they jigsaw interconnect. And these questions begin to do that process for them. Here's another one. I spy with my little eye that Angelou makes a lot of references to the natural world. What is this called? What is the author's intent, and how do these questions create meaning in the work as a whole? So I like this question a lot. There's a stark dichotomy between the you and I pronouns. So getting into syntax, literally, who is you? And students have a hard time with that question. They really don't get it. Literally, who is you? And it's a great discussion piece to have a discussion of who the you is. And then you flip it. There's a stark dichotomy between the you and I pronouns. Literally, who is I? How does Angelou characterize this I? Use the text to support your answer. Very good stuff. So several stanzas begin with a rhetorical question. What do we call that in poetry? Right? So teach a lot of terms, devices, techniques, close reading skills, all through gamification. So I plan on doing more of these with different poems, and ideally I want to do groupings of poems like I did my roadkill poems, and I try to group things thematically. So these are kind of 3 disparate poems, but ultimately I'll group them by theme. So if you have any suggestions or requests, I'll be happy to put that together. So if you would like these slides, feel free to reach out, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send them your way. Also note that going forward, I have teamed up with the National Writing Project. So they're offering all of my professional development opportunities under their umbrella, which is cool because a lot of teachers need professional development hours. And as you know, NWP is accredited, so you can get your completion badges through them. So everything from my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind to my one-offs. So every month we're doing a one-off. So last month I did my alternative grading method 2-hour intensive. This month I'm doing teaching line of reasoning 2-hour intensive. I'm doing my word study academy, my nuance academy. I'm going to get into a gamification seminar. my Plato's Play-Doh discussion. So every month there's going to be something new coming up. And they also are housing my self-paced course, which is pretty cool. So if you want any of that information, you can go to www.teachingwritingcoach.com. And NWP is able to offer a lot of this stuff for a lot less than I was as I was going solo, just because I'm not paying for all the overhead and web fees and all my little extraneous expenses. So feel free to go www.teachingwritingcoach.com. So hopefully this serves you well, and happy teaching, happy writing.